Okay, so this is if you're talking about power. So mostly the histories talk about power, but there are elements of power and how power is used and there's elements of all of these in all Shakespearean plays. That's why I'm going through them. But the main focus of power is going to be the histories and a lot of the tragicomedies like The Tempest. So if you're doing an essay on how power is seen differently between how we see power and how they saw power in the original. So we see power as being money, right? I mean, I won't say we live in a post-class world. We don't. And we definitely don't live in a post-race world. But it's nowhere near what it would have been like in back then, because then even if you had a ton of money somehow, you still didn't have the power. You still weren't the king or the queen. You still weren't an aristocrat. You probably couldn't own land without going through those power structures first. So Shakespeare's writing in a time when power is inherited. You can't earn power. We have this myth of a meritocracy here. I mean, power is inherited here too, but power in Shakespeare's time is completely about inheritance. So one of the ways you guard your inheritance is to guard the women, believe it or not. That's why so many of the comedies are about a father saying what his daughter can and can't do. Because how do you, if a father only has daughters, how do you secure your kingdom and the inheritance that comes with it? In The Tempest, you've got a guy who's been deposed from power, and he's exerting power over, and you can get into Ariel, and you can get into Caliban, and you can talk about how he's taking the power that he would have had, this ultimate privilege, and he's like exerting power over an elemental spirit and over someone who basically represents every single person who was being exploited by the empire at the time. And how do you see power differently? So how is power expressed differently in the play that you read versus the movie or the graphic novel? Like how do we see the concept of power change? So in the histories, you see a different kind of thing where the power is they have to follow the basic historical line, but when you look at it, it was very biased because Shakespeare had to portray certain rulers as being negative because they weren't related to his patron, right? So you got his patrons were Elizabeth and then James. So when you look at it, when he's writing something like Richard III, he's going to make him an anti-hero, and he's got to have the climax of the play is going to be less about choices or tragic flaws and more about like the forces of history that are forcing this inevitable point of conflict, right? And then everything from there just follows. And in more than in any other one, this is about restoring social order. And I talked about that before. So restoring social order means that something is out of joint, right? Remember our triangle? Something is not right with society, and through the actions of the play, everything returns to here, where it should have been before. And that can be the same with The Tempest, which is technically a comedy, but I don't know about that. Depends on how you play it. So how does that help you with your essay? So in your essay, you can try to do an essay comparing how they portray the power in your movie versus the play, right? Are they showing them as being more rich? Because some versions are completely set in like there's a Hamlet where they're not kings, they're the CEO of the Denmark Corporation. So that's more for this. So basically you can choose to do any of these, but if you really look at it, these are the main concepts that you're kind of like that are in pretty much all the plays, and yeah, choose one.